Hello, everyone. Welcome to Orthodoxy. My name is Andy Schmidt. I'm your host. Just wanted to talk real quick about the Paradox Press, brand new publication that a business partner and I just started. It is a Christian conservative publication, kind of online magazine. We are doing a soft launch in this first 10 weeks of the publication. So we're just going to release one new essay every single week that's completely free. You can go over there and read these for free. You can sign up for the newsletter. You can subscribe. All absolutely free. You'll get everything free in these first 10 weeks. And these essays are by some of the best writers in the country, maybe the best in the world. The first one was from Dr. Dale Ahlquist. He is the world leading scholar on G.K. Chesterton, which the whole publication was sort of predicated on the thoughts of G.K. Chesterton. He wrote on localism and that economic theory, but it's not boring. That sounds boring. It's not boring. It's very, very exciting stuff. It's economic theory, but it's for the masses. It's for the general person to read and understand, and it's very interesting. So it's not just this high-level academia. It's actually good, practical writing. That's the first one that came out. The second one that just came out by Dr. David Devil on being profit-pilled. He's called The Great If, basically looking back at the 20th century and learning from the people who warned us of what was going to come. People like Alexander Solzhenitsyn, C.S. Lewis, Schaeffer, G.K. Chesterton himself, and then seeing how those guys even were pulling from the great prophets of the Old Testament and of the Bible. And so warning us for what was going to come in the future and what we could do, what we could change. And so that's all at theparadoxpress.com, theparadoxpress.com. Go over there, take a look around, see what you think, and read through some of the articles. Subscribe, give us your email. We'll send all of these things to your inbox for free. But please, please, please go over there to theparadoxpress.com. Now to the interview. So I wanted to get started with something that Focal Points came out with, I think, a couple months ago, back in, I think, March of this year. You guys put out a breaking Senate investigation finds federal officials buried COVID-19 vaccine stroke risk. I'll read kind of the first little blurb from the article that you guys had put out, and then we can kind of discuss a little bit. But it says a new Senate investigation led by Senator Ron Johnson has uncovered that Biden administration health officials identified a statistically significant stroke risk tied to the Pfizer COVID-19 booster as early as November 2022, then buried it while pushing continued uptake in the elderly. So when I first read that, I reached out to you and I was like, this seems to be kind of important. Like, that's kind of interesting. And so can you explain that a little bit? What exactly was going on there?
So Senator Johnson and his team acquired mountains of documents from Health and Human Services in the White House under the leadership of the Biden administration, senior White House coronavirus advisor, Anthony Fauci. And what was going on is that in manuscripts that were being produced from state and federal investigators and scientists, that there was a dumbing down of the language in terms of risk. And so to kind of make it seem as if it's not as severe or worrisome as it really is. And in this case, we're talking about stroke. Right. That happens after taking a COVID-19 vaccine. And, there are plenty of peer-reviewed manuscripts that have demonstrated this. We know the vaccines load the blood vessels in the brain with spike protein. The spike protein eats away at the blood vessels. There can be a blood clot or a rupture of a blood vessel and a hemorrhage. And so a key paper from Japan by Ota and colleagues has found the vaccine and the spike protein right there in the blood vessels of the brain. It can't be more clear that the vaccine in some people causes stroke.
Are there any numbers on this as to how many strokes or anything like that they had found in these documents?
No, there's not a good handle on the absolute number, but there clearly is an understanding of risk. And the risk is certainly, double or more a risk, and someone has not taken one. And sadly, the last time I testified in Washington at the myocarditis hearing for Senator Johnson, Homeland Security, Governmental Affairs, Permanent Subcommittee Investigation, a patient sat behind me, Barbara Orendello, And there's pictures of me talking to her afterwards. She took Moderna. And I think it was within the next few days, had a massive stroke and intracranial hemorrhage, had to be airlifted, had to have her skull opened, the blood clot removed. It basically ruined her. She's paralyzed on one side. She's in a wheelchair. It's ruined her retirement. And shortly afterwards, she went on Laura Ingraham. She went on the Ingraham angle of Fox News, and I was on there. And so she was making it very public back then. This is in 2021, that the COVID vaccines can cause a devastating stroke.
I don't need to get conspiratorial right out of the gate, but I do want to ask you, years and years and years of finding these sorts of things out now, and, being told, almost gaslit into believing that the vaccines don't cause anything. They don't cause death, no heart attack. Like, nothing's correlated to the vaccines. And yet we're finding that that's actually all not true, that there are strokes coming from the vaccines and people are dying from the vaccines. And that's a fact. And so I don't know, what are your thoughts on why this was covered up? What was the point of that? Because maybe I'm more cynical than you. I hope I am, because I'm pretty cynical about this. What do you think?
The government agencies made an absolute commitment to the COVID-19 vaccines. It was an all-out commitment, very similar to how a government would be committed to military operations in a war.
Yeah.
It's just all out. And believe me, there's just absolutely nothing that's going to deter our government's support of the vaccines. And so if there's a side effect, those in the government, and they are charged with, carrying out this vaccine campaign, they're going to do everything they can to continue more vaccination. And that means covering up side effects. If you look at a military campaign, and if someone says, listen, you're in charge of a military campaign, do you think in the times of war that critical information is withheld from the public in order to keep public support for a war going?
Yeah.
For sure.
Right. So then what's, I guess the allegory is the war against the United States, against the people of the United States, because this is killing Americans. And I think, what do you think about that?
No, the PrEP Act in 2005 says it's going to be a war against a virus or a bacteria or fungi. So we're in a bio warfare situation.
Right.
And the government has decided that the premier emergency countermeasure is going to be mass vaccination. The interesting thing I find in all of this is that every government decided to do this.
Yeah.
The WHO has over 190 member nations. Vaccines are on international markets in over 140 countries.
Wow. Right
now, the only countries that don't have any vaccines on the market are the ones who simply can't afford them. And so here we are 6 years into this pandemic. And the US FDA, the VRBPAC, the Vaccine and Related Biological Products Group, has just approved the next fall booster.
Wow. Yeah. No, I didn't know that. That's not good to hear at all. But this is a big deal. One is because it seems big pharma, big government, huge media corporations, they're all tied to this thing. And I'm wondering where this is actually headed or where it's going, because we've had people like you and Dr. Mary Talley Bowden. There's so many across the country who have blown the whistle and all this stuff and have continued to fight Ron Johnson, and Ron Johnson has obviously continued to fight, and it's all honorable and good. But if we took this to its conclusion, or the conclusion that we want is, let's get the evidence out there and let's convict the people that need to be convicted, it seems to me like that would involve everyone in every industry, and especially the major industries in the United States and even across the world. What's the end goal for the health freedom movement?
Yeah, I think a big aspiration of MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, is to get COVID-19 vaccines off the market.
Yeah.
If they were off the market, it would symbolize that, it's kind of the end, right? That we're done with this. Most people, I'm in Dallas, Texas here. Nobody's talking about a pandemic. No one's locking down or wearing masks. Everyone's been back to normal now for years. Well, why should we pretend that there's still a pandemic and that we need to take life-saving boosters. So on focal points, and everybody listening to your podcast, which by the way is really getting popular, everybody listening to your podcast should subscribe to Focal Points. So if you go to www.thefocalpoints.com, sign up. It's free. You'll get it every day.
Yeah.
The issue that came out recently is a calculation. We were interested in knowing who's really taking boosters.
Yeah.
Do you know the CDC early on was saying, 25% of people are taking boosters. Now they say about 16%. Do you know they stopped reporting the actual number, even though they know the actual number? They rely on what's called the NIS, the National Immunization Survey.
Really?
So the CDC has like a robo-calling system where they keep calling people in random digit zip codes until somebody picks up. And they said, well, we want to ask you some questions. Are you likely to take a COVID vaccine? And if someone goes, well, yeah, I think I am, they say, okay, that's a taker. And so they have a methodology that inflates the number. It can never go down from what it was. It can only go up. It's kind of a rigged system. It's called the NIS. And so as I'm talking to people, I don't know about you, Andy, but I don't know anybody taking these shots. Yeah. And so we took the 2025 Security and Exchange Commission filings, the SEC filings, where you have revenue. And so you have Pfizer, Moderna, and they will report how much money they earned from vaccines. And Moderna just has the COVID-19 vaccine. You actually have the category. And then you can figure out the price that commercial insurance or governments pay for it. And you can do the math, and there's a accepted wastage number. About 12% are considered wasted. You can't use a multi-dose vial or it becomes expired. And so the answer came out today of how many people in America took a booster last year. And the answer is 31 million Americans. That comes out to 8.9% of people over 6 months of age. Sadly, in that group, and Dr. Mary Taylor Bowden has pointed this out, sadly, is probably a considerable fraction are children. Because it's on the childhood schedule, age 6 months and over. And in many places, 29 states, there's effectively no good way of getting out of these shots. The kids need them to go to school.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that actually makes a lot of sense about the children. I mean, when I was we had just my wife had given birth to our third child 7 months ago now. And I think that was when we had first done our first interview. And so we were a little like, okay, we're just going to hold off on all vaccines right away. And we're in Madison, so UW hospital is not the most friendly towards people who don't want to get vaccines. And so they were really pressuring us. They were really like not happy with us. And they started to give these weird statistics and numbers that didn't seem to add up. But I just asked the lady, I was like, look, because she had said like 25% of people who don't get the vitamin K or kids who don't get the vitamin K shot have like some crazy number of kids have like major problems later on. And I was like, well, are more or less people getting these shots? And she said a lot less. And that was a little interesting because Madison's highly progressive, highly liberal. They listen to the mainstream liberal media. And so I was sort of like, okay, if all these people aren't getting, and I said, how many people are coming back in with complications? And she's like, well, we haven't seen that many. And I was like, well, then your statistics don't really make that much sense. But anyways, I didn't really argue with her, but that was sort of, I was happy to hear that. I mean, we're in a highly progressive place where people just trust whatever the liberal media tells them.
Well, so Andy, what did you decide to do? Did your baby get the vitamin K shot?
No, and he's totally fine. He's been completely fine.
I reviewed that. The idea is if children are born prematurely, babies are born before 37 weeks, there is a rate of spontaneous intraventricular hemorrhage in the brain. And so that was one of the ideas that if we, and the babies are born prematurely, the GI tract is not yet producing vitamin K in the liver. So you actually give some vitamin K to help with coagulation, particularly if there's this risk of this catastrophic bleed. And then the idea is, well, if the male baby is going to have circumcision, maybe this can reduce bleeding. But if you look at the outcome study, vitamin K doesn't really make that much of a of an impact. You give vitamin K, it works several days
Yeah.
later. The children are not born with a coagulopathy. Where we give vitamin K is when I have patients on warfarin and we need to reverse it, we give vitamin K, and it still takes some time.
Mm-hmm.
So as you can imagine, 50 years ago, kids didn't take vitamin K,
Right.
and they were fine. So it just kind of got built into the program.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a big deal one way or the other,
Mm-hmm.
but the fact that you declined it, just goes to show that, certainly reasonable to go more natural. What did you and your wife decide about the hepatitis B shot?
We did. We just stayed away from everything at this point. And one of the, so you mentioned the circumcision, and that was one of the points of contention where they were like, okay, look, if you don't get the vitamin K shot, we can't do the circumcision right away. And we were like, okay, that's fine. But they said you should be able to schedule that immediately after. So then we tried to schedule it, and we can't get in. They've made it as difficult as they can because they're kind of, I think they're a little resentful that we didn't get the vitamin K shot. So like we haven't been able to get a circumcision, and we're sort of like, okay, I guess we're just not going to do that anymore. So that's the only complication. Other vaccines, like we haven't done anything with him yet, mostly because we're still trying to understand the whole framework of thinking around this. And it's very confusing because we're not doctors. I'm not a doctor. Like I don't know all the specific details. So yeah, like what's your suggestions on that as the child gets older? I remember last time you said kind of take it in a case by case, or like kind of go slowly. So are you still giving that advice?
Well, I think the first thing to establish is the child healthy at birth?
Yeah.
Is your child healthy?
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
So, and how many weeks gestation was he born? At full term? Or?
Yeah, full term. Yep.
Okay, so you have a full term healthy baby boy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And no special things in mom or dad. Mom or dad don't have any conditions.
No, none.
Yeah, okay, terrific. Well, McCullough Foundation has just published a very definitive report in the Journal of Independent Medicine. The name of the report's called The Determinants of Autism Spectrum Disorder. And this is now far and away the most comprehensive report on the risk factors for autism. And what we found in that report is that a healthy child born today, without the threats of illnesses that we had in years past and with healthy, normal parents, a healthy child born today remains healthier with no vaccines whatsoever through childhood. None. And the kids are healthier. And certain groups like Mennonites and Amish, you have some Amish up there in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
They never take vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one important finding of the report. The other kind of general assimilation is that we've identified risk factors for autism. So if you don't mind, let's use you, your wife, and your baby. Since your baby's how old now? Like 6 months?
7 months, yes.
7 months. Okay, so this is really germane to you.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go through the risk factors for autism. Are either you or are you over 40?
No, I'm 26. My wife is 27. Yeah.
Okay, so you're not old. So a man over 40, woman over 35, that's a risk factor.
Mm-hmm.
Baby born before 37 weeks, that's a risk factor. So you don't have that one either. Mm-hmm. How about siblings with autism? None. There's no siblings, right?
No. No. His siblings are our siblings. The baby.
No, his siblings.
Yeah, we have two, brother and sister, but no autism.
No autism. Okay, so you get that up. How about common genetic factors? So anybody in your family lineage with autism?
No, not that I know of. No.
Okay, and then how about maternal exposures? Did your wife take any heavy antidepressive, anti-psychiatric, or anti-seizure drugs?
No, none.
Okay. So you have zero predisposing factors in this child. So what we found is that children who have some predisposing factors, that a big bundle of vaccines can be a risk factor to trigger autism. So the babies are born normally, and then they become autistic, usually around a year and a half, when there can be a dozen or more different shots given altogether. So the children around that time have gotten a COVID vaccine, an influenza vaccine, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, measles, mumps, rubella, respiratory syncytial virus, Haemophilus influenza B, rotavirus.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and then I'm missing some more, but I just counted 11 right there. It's a big bundle of vaccines. The children get inflammation in the brain, and then some have a seizure. They get pretty sick, and then they quickly develop autism. And so this report is so convincing now. I don't think anything is going to overturn it. We sent it to Health and Human Services. We sent it to Robert F. Kennedy, and they're all on focal points because we can actually see who's reading our reports, which is always interesting and reassuring. And within 19 days, the CDC changed its wording on the website, Andy. They said, you know what? We can't rule out the connection between vaccines and autism.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is that a lot of those vaccines, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong here, I'd be interested to see what you have to say, is a lot of those can be cured. Like if somebody, gets some of these sicknesses, or I remember you mentioned the iron lung. What is the iron lung in connection to?
Well, that was the first primitive mechanical ventilator. But, if we haven't had polio in the water supply in the United States for 2 decades now. We have polio surveillance systems. But let's just say you went on a Christian mission to Pakistan and your child had poliomyelitis. Nowadays we would use corticosteroids, plasma exchange, we'd actually treat polio, just like we treat transverse myelitis, what have you. Measles, encephalitis, pneumonitis would be treated with corticosteroids and secondary antibiotics. So even very rare, severe illnesses would be treated. So we wouldn't have the same outcomes that we had before. And, for instance, one of the things the CDC and the World Health Organization track is measles. And in some years, believe it or not, we've had 600,000 cases of measles worldwide, according to the WHO. And they can't come up with a mortality statistic because there's really no adjudicated proven deaths anymore. No child should die of measles. It's treatable. And for the vast majority, it's a very mild illness. So if your child gets measles, it's going to be a rash for a few days, just like it was on the Brady Bunch. If they get chickenpox like I did, it's going to be a rash for a few days.
Right.
And even if there are complications, we now are very adept in the use of various antivirals. And I think the big thing is steroids. So there was a man at my church who I've always noticed he has a severe facial palsy and his face is drawn over. And one time I asked him, I said, gosh, how did that develop? He said, when I was a kid, I had a very severe case of the mumps and it wiped out my facial nerve. And actually I lost my hearing on that side.
Wow.
And which mumps can do. And I thought to myself, boy, that's probably 50 years ago that happened. If we had a case of mumps today and there was severe cranial nerve involvement, we would use steroids, just like we would with herpes simplex virus. So the bottom line is the risks are very different today. I think people should be very comfortable in treating things. Oh, by the way, out in JAMA is a piece titled The Resurgence of Tetanus. Resurgence of Tetanus. Do you know how many cases in the United States last year of tetanus there were in children?
No.
4.
Huge
4.
Resurgence.
Yeah, they're calling it a resurgence. Yeah. And 2 of those, the children presented with tetanus-prone wounds, and the parents declined tetanus immunoglobulin and vaccine. And so, the article is lamenting, parents not taking the vaccine. Well, if they just would have taken the vaccine, and one would argue if they just would have cleaned the wound better, we wouldn't have had this problem. But I mean, come on, 4 cases?
Did the article specify that there were only 4 cases, or did they leave that ambiguous?
No, it's only 4 cases. I mean, this is very well reported.
Interesting.
I mean, do you know how many babies are born each year. It's 3.3 million.
Yeah, the only reason I asked
Yeah.
that is just because I know that some of the tactics of these people writing these articles are to leave it ambiguous. So if you say there's a big resurgence and you don't tell people how many, it makes it seem worse than what it actually is. So I was just wondering if they actually mentioned that there were only 4.
Yeah, there was 4 cases. It's actually in JAMA. You can read it. They actually put it in several JAMA papers, resurgence of tetanus. So I quickly said, oh my gosh, it's probably a tsunami. And they're describing 4 cases. But, you know, the CDC has a tetanus network, but you know where they go to collect cases, particularly of neonatal tetanus. So when a baby's delivered, the baby can develop tetanus. You know where they go? Africa.
Oh, really?
Africa. And so last year, Andy, I went to Africa and I was in Tanzania, and we couldn't help but notice the Maasai people. The Maasai people are the people, they're tribesmen, and they wear these bright red shawls or blankets. You can't miss them. Anyhow, the Maasai villages have an outer fence made out of sticks, and it's all wound together. And then an inner fence where they have all the plates of the different families. And all the huts are made out of mud or dung, actually cow dung, either from, domestic cow or sheep or even water buffalo dung. And so, I can tell you tetanus is loaded in the stool, and it's in the soil. You can imagine a Maasai woman delivering a baby on the dirt in a Maasai village. That baby can get exposed to tetanus.
Yeah.
Right. So, that's where neonatal tetanus is a risk. Not in Madison, Wisconsin, when you're delivering in a hospital and they use sterile technique and the baby's delivered and the baby's suctioned and cleaned. And there is zero risk of neonatal tetanus. So why in the world would a pregnant woman get a tetanus vaccine?
Right.
So they say, well, it's because to prevent neonatal tetanus. But even before vaccines were given to pregnant women, and by the way, vaccines were not given to pregnant women 25 years ago or earlier. Really? It's a new thing. So in the book by Barkey and Gear, it's called Unavoidable Harm. It's a great guide for young parents about vaccines. In that book, they describe, I think in history in the United States, it was just a handful of cases of neonatal tetanus. It just doesn't happen. Right. So there are vaccines that are completely unnecessary. And that's one of them. Also for tetanus, there's been many papers written about how it's overutilized. Do you know every single time someone goes in the ER with any type of cut, they say, well, you should take a tetanus shot. Well, these cuts aren't necessarily tetanus prone. People get a paper cut or they cut it with a box opener or something. That's not a tetanus prone wound. And so, and nobody's keeping track of when they got their last tetanus shot. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of people getting unnecessary tetanus shots over and over again.
Okay, so this is all it's fascinating. And there's one thing that keeps running through my head, because you try to connect the dots and be like, okay, why are they pushing these vaccines on these children and on pregnant mothers? Why are they doing that? Obviously there's a lot of money involved, but I had seen a statistic, and I don't know where, or you can just debunk this if it's fake, but that men had generally over the past 30 years lost about 30% on average of testosterone just in the West. I don't know if that's true or not. My question is, assuming it's true, is there anything in these vaccines that could lower testosterone in men? Like, I know that you lower testosterone in men and you do something significant to the cultural imaginary at large. So have you heard anything about that, about testosterone dropping?
It is true. Testosterone in adult men for the last 20 years or so has been, as a population number, declining. Okay, so that's true. That comports with what I know. I don't think one of the risk factors is vaccination, though. I think the biggest one is excess weight. Interesting. And that the heavier we get, our testosterone levels drop. And then add into this fatigue and stress and diabetes and all these other factors, that's going to bring testosterone down, but it is a clear secular trend. Now, of interest, obesity crested about 3 years ago. Now it's on the way down.
Really?
In the United States. Yes, on the way down.
Really?
At the wellness company where I'm the chief scientific officer, we've put together a great product. It's called Zeus. And Zeus is about a dozen botanicals, different herbs and ingredients, natural ingredients that stimulate the Leydig cells in the testes to produce testosterone.
Interesting.
And all of them stimulated a little bit. So together they stimulated a lot. And let me tell you what, every man who's struggling with low testosterone, when I've suggested this, I said, why don't you try a natural approach before you consider taking testosterone injections? They've all remarked how amazing it is to have a natural boost in testosterone. So, as we get older, so someone your age, Andy, you look like you're so vigorous and, and so your testosterone levels are probably rocking at 1,200.
Yeah.
Someone like me, mine are probably like 400.
Yeah.
And so, Zeus is, to take some natural products and stimulate your own testosterone, and higher testosterone is associated with better muscle mass, better mental function, more energy, more vitality. The difficulty with testosterone injections is, it's synthetic testosterone. It's either testosterone cypionate or ethanate. And once a man starts taking testosterone injections, the testicles, they think, wow, I don't need to do anything now because, the testosterone's coming from outside. And so the testicles start to shrink.
Really?
And so there's testicular atrophy, and it typically doesn't come back.
Wow.
So I've seen some men on synthetic testosterone, and they may look really buff and huge muscles, what have you, but the testicles, Andy, are really small, sometimes as big as little marbles or BBs.
Really?
And it doesn't come back. And so I can tell you as a guy, I don't think I'd ever take testosterone shots. I'd much rather do it naturally.
Would you, again, I don't know if this is true. I'm just bouncing things off you now because this is interesting. Cigars, nicotine, does that raise testosterone? And can you talk, I don't know if that's true at all, and can you talk a little bit about, I think you were on Theo Von and you mentioned that smokers were the best equipped against COVID. Was that you who said that?
Yeah. So it was great fun to go on Theo. Now it turns out nicotine itself is not harmful to the human body. What's in smoke, the 2,000 components of tar, that's harmful.
Yeah.
So nicotine is what's called a nootropic. It actually perks up the brain and allows someone to have better attention. Yeah. And interestingly, it does tend to block some of the effects of the SARS-CoV-2, the COVID spike protein, the effects that it has on nerve endings. It doesn't get rid of spike protein, but clearly there's a study from Switzerland that I thought made a pretty convincing case that is true. And so we found that patients who have numbness and tingling, loss of mental clarity, other neurologic symptoms, that they perk up with a nicotine patch. So someone your size, non-smoker, I'd suggest an over-the-counter 7 milligram nicotine patch. So it's continuous nicotine for about 90 days, see if we can't clear things up. Not forever.
Wow.
Now, if a smoker, I'm trying to get them to come off from cigarettes, then I'll prescribe 21 milligrams, so 3 times the dose nicotine patch. Some people have said, well, what about the pouches or other things? You can do that, but it doesn't give a steady level. So it's kind of up and down, up and down. If you notice smokers, they're always going outside to smoke. They know when their nicotine levels go down and they feel the urge for a cigarette.
Right. Well, what was the push in getting rid? I mean, I get cigarettes have a lot of extra stuff in it that's really bad. That is just bad for you. Cigars, I don't know, like nicotine pouches, things like that. I guess my question is just why was that so, like they pushed that hard, even before I was born, getting rid of smoking. What was that? Why did they do that?
Well, smoking, in a paper by Sir Austin Bradford Hill and Richard Dahl, 1954, the physician smoking study done in the UK, they concluded that half of deaths among doctors themselves was directly due to smoking.
Really? Wow.
Smoking causes lung cancer, causes oral and esophageal cancer, directly it contributes to heart disease, heart blockages, and stroke. It's just a disaster. And at one point in time, we had 80% of the adult population smoking.
Wow.
Well, fortunately, smoking's kind of out. You can't smoke in most offices that we work in, and or at sporting games and things like this. So now the point prevalence of smoking is down to about 17%.
Wow.
Now, smoking cigars, it depends if one inhales it or not. If they just take the taste of the cigar in the mouth, it's probably less risky. If they inhale it, the same thing for a pipe. But anytime even that smoke and the tar is in the mouth, it can contribute to oral cancer. And let me tell you, this oral cancer of the tongue and the throat, Andy, you don't want it. It is the worst area to have a cancer in the body. The treatments are just, they've gotten better, but there's just no way I would want cancer there.
That makes sense. That's just interesting because it's, there is a lot of talk, and I wish that they would go after the food industry in the same way that they went after the smoking industry, in which, like the things that people are eating today, and we talk about like the obesity rates and things like that. I mean, it seems to be almost equivalent to say 80% of people were smoking. It's like what we're eating in the United States is horrible, and it doesn't feel like anybody's going after the food industry or any of that stuff in the same way. Do you feel that way with the food that people are eating in America?
Right. There's been a resistance in terms of even simple interventions. So some have said, listen, anybody who produces a meal like McDonald's or Whataburger or Chick-fil-A, they ought to tell you in it how many calories and what are the major macronutrients. And that would be the sugars, the starches, the protein, and the saturated fat. And so you see that way you could make a decision. So like, for instance, I try to keep my saturated fat intake under 10 grams a day. That's pretty much in line with the American Heart Association. Today, for sure, I'm going to do that since I had a very, very healthy breakfast, no lunch, and I'll go into dinner. I'll be in great shape. Do you know if I went out to Whataburger in Texas, that's kind of our big hamburger place, and I had a Whataburger and fries, do you know that would be, Andy, that would be 60 grams of saturated fat.
You don't even, nobody,
Six times.
No, nobody knows what they're even putting in their bodies. Like my wife and I, you start to look into this stuff, and you're like, looks like you make one meal at McDonald's is like your entire daily intake for everything. You shouldn't eat anything else, and it's probably way over. But even so, like, I think that the labels are all good, and I think that people should definitely know like how many calories and what's exactly in what you're eating. But what about regulating some of these chemicals? Like some of these chemicals and some of the things they're putting in these foods, it doesn't seem like there's any actual health benefits to them at all. It's more for the benefit of preserving and for mass manufacturing or for getting it out to as many people as possible. What do you think about that?
Well, there has been some progress. This has been overlooked, but there's something called trans fat. So if you take a saturated fat, which is bad, saturated fats are like your animal fats, Crisco, things like this. That they directly stimulate the liver to produce cholesterol. They add tons of calories. They make you fat. I mean, just they're not essential. So everything about them's bad. So if you take saturated fat, you chemically modify it. You super saturate it with more hydrogen ions. You can actually make it last a very long time. So they're called trans fats. That's what allowed a sleeve of McDonald's fries to stay up under the light for an entire day. And you couldn't tell if it was old or new. You really couldn't tell. It also, for instance, a bag of Doritos, if you took a bag of Doritos on the shelf that came from the factory a month ago or 10 years ago, you couldn't tell the difference. That's how good this is. Well, it turns out the trans fats, American Heart Association and American Dietetic Association, it became so obvious this was contributing to heart disease that they worked with all different types of organizations. And the working example is New York City when Bloomberg was mayor. Oh, really? And they kept a track of heart attack rates in New York City. And then they got the trans fats out of the food supply. They got them out of fast foods and restaurants. They literally just banned it. And heart attack rates dropped. The intervention worked, and now nobody's using trans fats now. So they're basically gone.
Really?
And I think that type of progress can be made. People have pointed out these food dyes, the yellow, red, and blue food dyes. They're derived from petroleum products. And, you eat some M&Ms, for instance. What makes it colorful is petroleum products. And in preclinical studies, they have been oncogenic in some studies, meaning they could, at least in animals, could in high doses lead to cancer.
Really?
And then in human studies, for sure, they worsen hyperactivity and attention deficit disorder behavior. So if you take some kids who have ADHD and you study them very carefully and then give them a bunch of Starbucks or not Starbucks, but Starburst, or you give them M&Ms, what have you, the kids will get more hyperactive.
Yeah.
So what people have said is, listen, can we just get the dyes out? And, the USDA and FDA is trying to do that. Now it's very slow. They're very slow to move. For example, you can use beetroot and other types of red dyes that are natural.
Yeah.
So some have said, okay, let's go after food dyes, but the bottom line is we still need people to make healthy choices.
I agree. Yeah.
Healthy choices in portion control. And so, I never fed my kids Starburst or M&Ms and things like this. And, you and your wife are probably not doing the same. So my kids didn't end up with any of these problems like ADHD. They're just normal kids. And that's what you want. You just want to give your kids a chance. We were careful not to feed them chicken McNuggets and burgers and fries and pizza. And neither one of my kids are obese. And so now they're free of that problem. So, so much of parenting is just making the right choices. And, kids can hear the word no. If they say, I want burgers and fries, whatever. No, we're going to make a healthier choice. I'll never forget when my kids were young, they got invited to a pizza party. So you just wait, Andy, when this happens, you're going to go to a pizza party. I'll never forget the chain was called Chuck E. Cheese's.
Oh,
Chuck E. Cheese's. So all the kids were there. So all the kids were at Chuck E. Cheese's and they were running around playing games and eating pizza. And the parents to almost every one of them was obese, except for myself. I don't think my wife went to this one. And so there I was at Chuck E. Cheese's eating a salad. And this big guy came up to me. He goes, hey, Doc. He goes, aren't you going to eat any pizza? And I said, well, take a look at me. Do I look like I eat pizza? He goes, no, it looks like you don't eat pizza. I mean, it was one of those, moments,
Well, this is the interesting thing because I talked to some friends recently who had traveled overseas, and actually this gets into some of the most recent Senate hearings, and I think on June 3rd is when they were, but people overseas, in Europe, let's just say, are not as obese as the United States. They have a lot more food regulation and there are more rules around that. I mean, I even think about, I think some friends were in Italy or something and, they're eating pizza and bread and carbs and all this stuff. And it was, in America, for me, I'm just going to get bloated. Like it's going to look like I put on 150 pounds if I eat all that stuff. But they were saying how it didn't affect their stomach at all, that they didn't have the bloating and the issues that they had in the United States over in these other countries because there are less chemicals and things like that induced into the foods. So one thing is, it is tough for people because of all the advertising, being pushed down your throat when you watch TV, like eat this and this, and they try to make it seem like it's healthy, but you don't know all the specific details and we're not all, dietitians and people with degrees, and not that you have to have a degree to know this, but it is difficult to know exactly what's in your food. But too, like it's similar to me to the big pharma stuff where they're advertising this stuff on TV and you don't know what's in any of this. And so I don't know, like, I know that it's not American to regulate stuff. We're very much like, we don't want the government involved in what we're doing. But do you think that the food industry has gotten to the point where it's so complicated, it's so complex that relying on the average American to figure out exactly what's in everything that they're eating seems to be too much? Or is that just me being lazy?
No, it's not too much.
Sure.
I would say, listen, if I was running things, I'd want everything to have a food label on it.
Yeah.
And, to at least give you some estimates so you can make a choice. The Europe example is interesting. Believe it or not, rates of obesity in countries like Spain are almost identical to the United States. But I go to Europe a lot. I'll be there next month. And couple observations. Europe has much better public transportation. That means people are walking a lot more to buses and subways, whatever. So they actually get more physical activity. The other thing you'll notice in Europe, when you order, certainly at a restaurant, the portions are smaller.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you don't get these huge portions. So portions are smaller. And sure, there may be some, elements of managing starches or other things that people have said, well, the flour is different there, what have you. It's possible. But, a couple things that are on the horizon, you saw some protests on this. Do you know there's a herbicide that's in Roundup? It's called glyphosate.
Okay.
So, and that started around 1997, 1998. So when I was a kid, we didn't have any of that. If you ate a tomato, it would just be a tomato. But this started in the late 1990s and became just a standard in farming. And what happens is fields are sprayed with this. It kills all the weeds. And then all the crops have to be genetically modified. It's called GMO, genetically modified organism, to survive the Roundup or the glyphosate. And so not only is glyphosate everywhere, it's in the water supply and everywhere, but the food we're eating is different because it's been genetically modified.
Right.
And so there's been some studies now, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, which is a federal study, shows that 81% of us have glyphosate in us. If we did a urine test, we have this stuff in us. And the question is, do we worry or do we not? It's so ubiquitous. Right. Well, there's been some studies in people with massive exposure to glyphosate, which is people working with crops and spraying, working with the Roundup.
Right.
And there is an increased risk of lymphoma. It's not a huge increased risk, but there's some. And it's probably to the point where it's legit. And so Bayer Monsanto, in a settlement, which is about ready to be finalized, is going to pay people out, people who worked with this stuff, the croppers and other people. If they have a particular type of what's called non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, they're going to get a payout. But recently, the people really pushed this. And I don't know if you saw the news where Trump and RFK came out and said, listen, we're going to grant these companies immunity because this is a national security risk, that if we go without the glyphosate, it's going to influence food and crop management and prices and food supply. So now there's a feeling we're kind of stuck with it.
Yeah. That's that's interesting. I want to quickly talk about the Senate hearing of June 3rd because there's a lot there, and I guess I'll start with just quoting Senator Ron Johnson in his opening statement. He said, "It should come as no surprise, therefore, that during the pandemic, treatment alternatives using cheap and safe generic drugs were not only suppressed, but actively sabotaged in favor of a liability-free and highly profitable experimental gene therapy. The fact that all the institutions that benefit from big pharma's actively push the experimental gene therapy. It is is also the reason they are now working so hard to suppress the reality of COVID mRNA injection injuries. So can you break that down a little bit? What exactly is Senator Ron Johnson talking about here? And for people who don't know as well, because not everybody's following this, like, what is big pharma? What do we mean when we say big pharma?
Well, I think it all centers around the vaccines. So, there was a plan very early on by Health and Human Services and all kinds of interested parties, the World Health Organization, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation, the CDC, the US FDA, that our primary response was going to be mass vaccination, that everything else was going to be too messy.
Right.
So there was a government concerted effort to try to suppress any progress made with treatments, to undermine drugs like hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, but also nasal sprays and gargles, vitamin D, colchicine, corticosteroids. McCullough protocol was the most widely used protocol to treat COVID-19 in the world. Really? It was credited with saving tens of millions of lives, sparing hundreds of millions of hospitalizations, but it used a lot. I mean, there was a lot of drugs in the McCullough protocol. All of that was not encouraged by the government agencies. It was actually actively suppressed and undermined.
Yeah, it was disparaged. It was
disparaged in order to make people believe the only thing they could do would take a vaccine.
Yeah.
It wasn't really about any particular legal loophole. It was just, listen, if we can make people fearful enough, there'll be vaccine uptake. And, a recent paper published in literature, we focused on this in focal points. They took millions of tweets, believe it or not, used artificial intelligence to evaluate these tweets. And the conclusion was people felt fearful about the virus, and their fear was relieved when they took a vaccine.
Oh, man. So that tells you that the foundation of their worldview is very centralized around the governmental authority. If what the government tells you to do makes you feel at ease with your fears, then you trust the government, in my opinion, way too much. And was that in America, or was that across the globe, or where was that?
That was in America. And there were fearful messages. Remember these messages? They all came out the same day. No one is safe, or crisis of the unvaccinated, or remember when Biden came out, it said it's going to be a long, dark, deadly winter for the unvaccinated. Yeah. And, the vaccines didn't work. They didn't stop COVID. They didn't stop transmission. They didn't prevent severe disease. They didn't save lives. Yeah. Remember, what saved lives was people getting natural immunity, early treatment like McCullough protocol, and then the virus getting milder. Right. No randomized trial ever showed the vaccines reduced mortality. No valid non-randomized study controlled for those factors and found the vaccine had an effect. Still, a false narrative out there is that the vaccines save millions of lives. It's no different than the false narrative that came out originally. Do you remember when Rachel Maddow came out and said, you take the vaccine, it's going to stop the virus in its tracks? She was basically articulating a completely false narrative, just like when I was in the US Senate about a year ago, Richard Blumenthal, the senator for Connecticut, said the vaccine saved millions of lives. It's no different. He's propagating a false narrative.
So will there be accountability for these media personalities who push that? Because I think, and I don't want to be too inflammatory or anything like that, I'm just thinking of the Nuremberg trials, in which obviously there was a lot of the media, the Hitler's media, they were like a big propaganda outlet, and they were part of the trials, and that plays a huge role in the deaths of real people. And I think, I'm not saying that this was like World War II. I mean, in some ways, people died. People died from this vaccine, and so that's a fact. And so, is there going to be accountability for not just big pharma, but also for the media? And it seems like they knew that they were lying, or that they knew that they were being a propaganda outlet for what the government was telling them to say. And what are your thoughts on that?
I had a chance to go to Nuremberg a few years ago, and I went to the Office of Letters. I reviewed it all firsthand. And, the Nuremberg trials, The vast majority of people who participated in these atrocities, you know what their defense was?
No. What is
I
it?
was just following orders.
Oh, yeah.
So I think most people in the media are going to say, listen, we just followed what the government put out there as these news pieces. We were just following orders. But, there wasn't a single station. I think we got 4,000 TV stations in the United States. There wasn't a single TV station that had a featured program about early treatment strategies. Not a single station had discussions about emerging vaccine safety risks. They just went with this. To this day, they still go with this.
Which is like kind of a direct inversion of what the press and free speech and the media is supposed to be in the United States. They're supposed to hold the government accountable, hold people accountable, and not just for no reason. It's not like you just distrust the government altogether just because it's the government. But the whole point is like, we got to hold these people accountable because they have a lot of power. And it did seem like during COVID, that kind of just went out the window. It was like, whatever Biden says is true. Whatever Fauci says is true.
It did. Again, two circumstances where the media does not seek different opinions and does not provide any type of counterfactual narrative. And that is with public health crises and war.
Yeah.
This is very important. War. And all countries do this. Do you know right now in Israel, if any Israeli citizen independently reports on what they see going on, it's punishable with 5 years imprisonment.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So in times of war and public health crises, they're scary times because I'm sure people in the media felt like, wow, I want to report something different, but they're worried about the repercussions of doing so. And look at the people who lost their jobs through the pandemic, Tucker Carlson and so many more. And others, believe it or not, those on the side of the government narrative, they lost their jobs too. Remember Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon?
Yeah.
So what we saw, Andy, is, and this is the silver lining, what we saw come out of the pandemic is the power and the interest in independent media, shows like yours. And it shows like yours that seek my opinion. There's no reason why CNN shouldn't ask my opinion, but so people are now getting their information from podcasts, from analyses. They follow others who they find their input useful. I have many followers that say, Dr. McCullough, you just seem to give us the straight answer, always scientifically based and supported, cited in the peer-reviewed literature. And I'm in clinical practice. I'm board certified. I'm in clinical practice. I make these decisions every day. I work with patients every day. And it's just terrific to see you develop as a podcaster, to see your young family grow, and you're making all the right decisions, doing all the right things.
I hope so. I appreciate that. And I will say, I remember in 2020 during COVID, I didn't ever think it would happen where the main source of news and information would be the Joe Rogan podcast. When you went on there, when Malone went on there, that kind of shook everything up because it became very clear during COVID that more people cared about the independent voices that were on the Joe Rogan podcast than what they cared about, whether it was Fox News or CNN or any of those cable news. Like something was shifting in the media sphere. And so that was interesting, and it's still interesting to watch because we're seeing that shift continue to happen. So that's an interesting point. So the final question I guess is like, how do you grade the MAHA and the Trump administration right now, and where is the health freedom movement going? Like, what, are you just going to continue to try to put out factual information and to uncover what happened during COVID, or what's the goal?
I when I left the U.S. Senate hearings about a year ago in the Senate chamber in the Russell building, I was the lead witness. The press immediately pounced on me when I got outside the chambers. And one of the questions I got was, and this is about a year ago, I said, how would you grade Trump and RFK on MAHA, Make America Healthy Again? And I said, well, I said, a B plus. I want to see them do better. I have to tell you, you know what? Their grade point average has sunk.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'd give them probably a C plus now.
Oh, man.
So here we are 2 years into it. We don't have a qualified surgeon general. We haven't even had a qualified surgeon general nominated. I mean, we need a doctor with public health service experience, hundreds of peer-reviewed publications, a broadly knowledgeable doctor with medical authority, and who has leadership experience leading, many, many doctors, hundreds if not thousands of doctors. So far, no one fits that bill. 2 years, the position is not filled. We've gone through an FDA commissioner in less than 2 years.
Yeah.
And, he was a surgeon who didn't have any medical experience, no regulatory experience, and just, I'm sure was not respected at all within the agency. So he's gone. People below him also without substantial regulatory or academic medical experience, they're gone. We've had an acting CDC director for nearly 2 years. Now someone's been nominated. Now she does have public health service experience. She's led large groups, and we'll see how she does. Now our temporary director of the FDA VRBAC, Biologic Products and Regulatory Group, he's a former pharmaceutical representative and executive.
Oh, man.
So, I mean, this is, like I say,
C plus seems a little generous.
Yeah, but listen, we have qualified people out there. We've got to get them in position. If we don't get qualified people in position, we'll never have innovative policies that make America healthy again. RFK has got to do better. He didn't show up for my Senate hearings. I don't think he showed up for the Ron Johnson hearings about COVID vaccines. And listen, you're Health and Human Services Secretary. This is like the biggest thing you do when you're having a Senate hearing about a drug safety problem is you got to show up.
Yeah.
Makes a big difference. So anyhow, we're at time, Andy.
Sorry.
But thank you so much for having me on the program. And congratulations on, building such a successful podcast following. You're doing great work.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for doing this. This is fun. Thanks for watching this interview. Just wanted to remind you to go on over to theparadoxpress.com right now. Check out the new site, check out the new essays, check out the old essays, check everything out. Give us your email, sign up for our newsletter, and we will send everything for free to your inbox every single week. Podcast, essay, we'll send it all over there. It is a new publication for setting forth a vision for conservatism and for Christians in America. And so going over to theparadoxpress.com, theparadoxpress.com. The link is in the description.